What you are about to hear is the philosophical equivalent of a black hole. It is a concept so psychologically disruptive, so existentially dark that it explains not only the quiet despair of your dating life, but the very engine of human suffering itself. Within the next minutes, we will dismantle the foundational lie you've been told about desire. A lie that has left you chasing phantoms and hollowed out by relationships that were doomed before they even began. By the end of this exploration, you will possess a key, a forbidden lens that will allow you to see the hidden wiring of female desire, not to become a better manipulator, but to finally free yourself from a game you were never designed to win. Before we begin, if you're serious about personal growth, not just the comforting lies, but the brutal, unvarnished truth, then you'll find real value in my ebook, The Black Book of Human Nature. It's a practical manual that breaks down the suppressed truths of human behavior, giving you the tools to finally understand yourself and the world more deeply. The link is in the pinned comment. The central claim of this discourse is both simple and devastating. You have never been loved for who you are, the person you believe yourself to be, the identity you have painstakingly built, your virtues, your flaws, your hobbies, your accomplishments. These are not the object of desire. They are at best the screen upon which a much deeper, more ancient, and fundamentally impossible drama is projected. To understand this is to experience a shock that verges on the traumatic, followed by the profound and liberating peace of a man who has finally seen the matrix of his own prison. This is the heart of Land's theory of the object petite, the object cause of desire. The A stands for autre another, but it is not the big other of language in society. It is the little other, the elusive spectral thing that we mistake for a tangible goal, but which is in reality nothing but a void. It is the unattainable essence we believe will complete us once we acquire it. For men, this often manifests as a quest for status, power, or a particular idealized woman. But for the female subject operating within a different psychic and symbolic structure, the pursuit of the object takes on a uniquely tragic and relentless character. Her desire is not for you, the man. It is for what you lack. To grasp the sheer brutal genius of this, we must first descend into the origin of desire itself. Land, building on Freud's most unsettling work, posits that desire is born in trauma. Not a personal trauma, but a universal human one. The trauma of birth, of separation from the maternal body, from a state of imagined wholeness. This is the real estate of undifferentiated bliss, that we are violently ripped from upon our entry into the world of language of symbols of the law, what Land calls the symbolic order. From that moment on, we are castrated from our primal completeness. We are defined by a lack, and our entire psychic life becomes a desperate, frantic attempt to fill this primordial void. We are like a cup that has a hole drilled in its bottom, forever pouring in water, forever wondering why we cannot feel full. This is not a metaphor for simple dissatisfaction. It is the structural condition of being a speaking being. We are haunted by a lost paradise that never in fact existed. It is a phantom limb of the soul. This is where we find our first crazy story, a case study that Land himself would have adored for its sheer grotesque clarity. Consider the historical phenomenon of the courtly love poets of the 12th century. These men, knights and troubadours, would dedicate their entire lives to the worship of a noble lady, a domina. They would compose exquisite poems, perform impossible feats of valor, and languish in a state of perpetual agonizing longing. But here's the crucial psychoanalytic twist. The entire structure of courtly love demanded that the lady remain utterly unattainable. She was almost always married to the knight's lord, placing her under the law of the father, the ultimate taboo. The poets did not truly desire consummation. In fact, had the lady ever yielded, the entire elaborate fantasy would have collapsed into the boring, mundane reality of a mere affair. The object of their desire was not the woman herself, but her inaccessibility. Her value was constituted by the very barrier that prevented them from having her. She became the sublime object, the object shining with an impossible light precisely because she was forbidden. The moment the barrier falls, the sublime object turns into an ordinary, disappointing thing. This is the first law of desire. It is not directed towards an object but towards the fantasy that the object will fill our lack. The lady was a screen for the poet's own lack, just as the modern woman makes you a screen for hers. Now transpose this medieval drama to the modern dating app. A man sees a woman's profile. She is beautiful. She is smiling. She's pictured on a mountaintop. She is in that moment the lady. He swipes right. He crafts a witty message. He is the troubadour performing his digital chivalry. He believes his desire is for her, but Lon would say no. His desire is for the fantasy she represents. The fantasy of a life without lack, a life of completion, of no more swiping, of no more loneliness. She is not a person. She is a potential plug for the hole in his being. And because no human being can ever be that plug, the relationship is born under a death sentence. It is destined to fail the moment the fantasy collides with the real of her humanity, her morning breath, her insecurities, her own gaping lack. The joy of the initial conquest is always followed by the shock of the other's reality. This is why the honeymoon phase ends. It's not because you stop trying. It's because the fantasy inevitably evaporates, revealing the lack it was designed to conceal. But this is only half the story, the male side. To understand the female pursuit of the OBJ, we must delve into what Land called the not all. This is one of his most complex and misunderstood formulas. Land argued that woman is not whole in the phallic function. This does not mean she is incomplete or inferior. It means that her relationship to the symbolic order, the world of language, law, and identity, is fundamentally different. A man's identity is often totalized under the phallic as a signifier. He is defined by having it or being it by his status, his power, his possessions. His is a logic of all. He seeks to be fully defined within the symbolic. But a woman is not all captured by this phallic signifier. There was always a part of her that exists outside of it, a mysterious supplemental jouance, a kind of ecstatic enjoyment that is beyond the phallic economy of having and being. This is why the question, what does a woman want, has echoed through the ages from Freud to today. It is an unanswerable question because her desire is not fully representable in our symbolic structure. It is linked to this other jouance, a bliss that is beyond the phallus. This brings us to the core of our thesis. What then is the object for woman? If she is not wholly defined by the phallic game of having and being, what is the impossible object that sets her desire in motion? The answer is both simpler and more profound than you might think. The object for woman is the man's own lack. She does not desire a man who is complete, who is a solid phallic rock. Such a man is boring, predictable, and ultimately a fantasy that cannot hold her desire because it does not resonate with the not all of her own structure. No, what she desires is a man who embodies a lack that she can in her fantasy fill. She desires a man who has a wound, a mystery, a drive, a cause beyond her. She is drawn to the void in him because in filling that void, she attains a sense of purpose and accesses her own supplemental joyance. She doesn't want the phallus. She wants to be the phallus for the man. She wants to be the object that causes his desire, the missing piece that completes him. This is the ultimate female fantasy, to be the sublime object for a man whose desire is oriented towards a grand external cause. Her desire is to be the ultimate and necessary support for his mission. Let us ground this in a chilling historical fact, a piece of forbidden research that mirrors this very principle. During the rise of the Third Reich, the Nazi regime, understanding the power of mass psychology, perfected a form of propaganda that did not just sell policies but sold an object of desire. They didn't just promise a better economy. They promised the return of a lost mythical wholeness, the Thousand-Year Reich. They created a Führer who was not presented as a complete perfect man, but as a vessel for a national lack, a man who had sacrificed everything for the Volk. And what was the role they crafted for German women? They were to be the supplement to this lack. They were the mothers of the heroes, the bearers of the future, the silent, joyful support that made the soldiers' sacrifice possible. Their propaganda films didn't show women as independent agents. They showed them beaming with pride as their sons and husbands went off to die. They were offered the fantasy of becoming the flawless for the entire nation, of filling its lack with their bodies and their devotion. This is the object A on a geopolitical scale. The promise of becoming the essential sublime object for a cause that is by its very nature insatiable and impossible. The cause consumed them, and when it collapsed they were left with nothing but the void it revealed. This is the dark historical proof of how female desire when channeled into a political fantasy can be weaponized. The same psychological mechanism operates in the romantic sphere, albeit on a smaller, more intimate scale. Now visualize this in a modern scenario. Imagine two men. The first is Mark. Mark is a good guy. He has a stable job, he's reliable, he's emotionally available. He centers his life around his girlfriend. He tells her, "You complete me." He believes this is the highest form of love. But from a Leanian perspective, he has made a catastrophic error. By telling her she completes him, he is placing the unbearable burden of his own lack directly onto her. He is making her responsible for his wholeness. There is no mystery, no void for her to project her fantasy onto. He is a closed book, a finished product. He becomes quite literally undesirable because he offers no space for her desire to operate. He has nothing for her to fill. Now consider the second man, Alexander. Alexander is driven by a cause. It might be his business, his art, his physical fitness, his intellectual pursuits. He is not defined by his relationship. He is defined by his lack, by the gap between what he is and what he is driven to become. He is fundamentally incomplete. When his girlfriend is with him, she is not the center of his universe. She is a welcome addition to a universe that already has a center of gravity elsewhere. She is tempted by the fantasy of filling the lack that his drive creates. If I can support him, if I can be the one he comes home to, then I will be the flawless for him. I will be the essential supplement to his existence. His lack is the hook that captures her desire. This is not about being a cold, distant jerk. It is about having a psychic architecture that is not collapsed inward, begging for completion, but is oriented outward towards a cause. Her desire is not for Alexander the person, but for the lack his drive represents. She desires to be the object that causes his desire, the prize that fits into the missing piece of his puzzle. The moment he makes her the center, the fantasy shatters, and she is left with just another Mark. This is the shocking truth that Lon unveils. The stability of female desire is not anchored in your presence, your provision, or your perfection. It is anchored in your absence, not a physical absence, but a psychic one. The presence of a lack that is more compelling than any false wholeness you could ever present. Your reliability, your goodness, your virtues. These are the things you believe make you lovable. But in the unconscious economy of desire, they are often the very things that extinguish it because they leave no room for the fantasy of the object to breathe. The joy a woman feels in a relationship is not the joy of possessing a complete man, but the joy of participating in the fantasy of completing an incomplete one. The moment the man appears truly complete, the game is over. This is the cruel, ironic logic of desire that Lon forces us to confront. We have now laid the foundation. We have exposed the primordial lack that defines our being, traced its manifestation in the historical and modern pursuit of the object and uncovered the specific tragic structure of female desire as a desire for the man's lack. But this knowledge, while powerful, is merely the key turning in the lock. It explains the mechanism of your suffering, but it does not yet provide the path to freedom. For that, we must venture into even darker territory. Now, we will expose the 3 specific modern societal traps that are designed to exploit this very psychological principle, keeping you forever chasing a phantom and her forever dissatisfied. We will dissect the beta provider not as an economic category, but as a psychic one. A man who has been symbolically castrated not of his masculinity, but of his lack. We will explore how the culture of therapeutic validation actively destroys a man's desirability by encouraging him to externalize his void. And most disturbingly, we will reveal how your own desire for a mother, for that return to primal wholeness, is the very thing that guarantees every relationship you enter will become a quiet, soul-crushing prison. The door to the cage is now open. The question is, do you have the courage to step out and see the bars for what they truly are? We have crossed the threshold and seen the desolate machinery of desire. We understand now that we are being structured around a fundamental lack, and that the elusive object A is the phantom we chase in a vain attempt to fill it. We have seen how female desire in its specific Lannian architecture is not for the man himself, but for the lack his drive represents. A desire to be the flawless, the sublime object that completes his mission. This knowledge is the philosophical equivalent of a shock from a defibrillator, jarring, painful, but necessary to restart a heart that has been lulled into a fatal sleep by societal lies. Yet, knowing the nature of the trap is only the first half of liberation. The second, more terrifying half is understanding that the world you live in is not a neutral landscape, but a carefully constructed factory designed to keep you ensnared within that very trap, to exploit your lack and weaponize hers. It is a system that profits from your perpetual dissatisfaction and your misguided attempts to cure it. To walk free, you must first see the bars not as the horizon, but as the cage. We must now expose the three great societal mechanisms that conspire to keep you chasing the phantom: the systematic creation of the symbolically castrated man, the seductive poison of therapeutic validation, and the ultimate psychic prison of the maternal fantasy. The first and most pervasive trap is the engineering of the beta provider, a term we must strip of its superficial red pill connotations and understand at its profound psychoanalytic core. This is not merely a man who lacks aggression or earns a moderate income. He is a man who has been symbolically castrated. In Lannian terms, castration is not a physical act but the price of entry into the symbolic order, the acceptance of the law of limits, of the fact that we cannot be everything. However, a healthy masculine structure accepts this symbolic castration but retains a connection to his drive, the relentless force that circles the object. The beta provider, however, suffers a second pathological castration. He is castrated from his own lack. He is encouraged to become a seamless, reliable, and utterly non-threatening servant to the system. His desires are prepackaged. A good credit score, a suburban home, a reliable car, a stable routine that asks nothing of the universe and offers no mystery in return. He is taught to center his life around the provision of comfort and stability, believing this is the ultimate expression of love and value. But in doing so, he makes a catastrophic error. He presents himself as a finished product, a closed loop. There is no void in him, no raging conflict, no terrifying ambition, no lack for a woman's desire to latch on to. He is a wall, not a doorway. He becomes the embodiment of the flawless as a sterile possession, not as a dynamic lack. He has nothing to be supplemented. A woman may choose him for security, for companionship, for social convenience. But she cannot desire him in the Lannian sense because his very structure annihilates the space where her desire is meant to operate. He is the anti-object. Consider historical figure of Leupold Bloom from James Joyce's Ulysses. He is decent, caring, intellectually curious, but he is also cuckolded wandering the streets of Dublin while his wife Molly prepares to receive her lover. Bloom is the archetypal modern man, empathetic and complex. Yet he fails to hold his wife's desire because his world is one of received opinions and internalized civility lacking a terrifying personal cause. He is symbolically sanitized. The system needs these men. They are the predictable taxpayers, the compliant employees, the stable nodes in the social network. But they are psychically invisible to the feminine unconscious, which is tuned to the frequency of a more disruptive signal. This leads us directly to the second trap, which is the culture of therapeutic validation, the most seductive and spiritually corrosive doctrine of the modern age. It presents itself as salvation, as the path to mental health and self-acceptance. Its language is everywhere. You are enough. Your feelings are valid. Heal your inner child. On the surface, this appears compassionate, but through a Lannian lens, it is a doctrine of profound self-annihilation for a man. Why? Because it actively encourages you to externalize your lack, to frame your primordial void as a wound that needs to be healed by another person, typically a partner or a therapist. It teaches you to make your lack a problem to be solved rather than the very engine of your being. A man who is constantly working on himself in the therapeutic sense, who is focused on processing his trauma and managing his triggers, is a man who is fundamentally oriented inward towards his own lack as a pathology. He is asking the world and the woman in his life to see his lack as a flaw to be accommodated, not as a mystery to be respected. He is in effect demanding to be mothered. This is the death of desire. Recall our model. Desire is for the other's lack. When you present your lack as a needy, vulnerable wound, you are not presenting a compelling void for her to fill as the phallus. You are presenting a bottomless pit of need that demands she abandon her own desire to become your caregiver. This is the ultimate role reversal. She does not want to be your therapist. She wants to be your muse. She wants to be the prize for your engagement with the external world, not the nurse for your internal retreat from it. The therapeutic culture, for all its good intentions in treating pathology, has been co-opted into a system that produces men who are psychically castrated. Men who have been taught that the highest form of masculinity is emotional vulnerability and the sensation of striving. This creates a man who is safe, predictable, and utterly undesirable. He has been convinced to sterilize his own drive, the very thing that makes him compelling. To understand the sheer historical scale of this psychic manipulation, we must look beyond the therapist's couch to the grandest experiments in social engineering. Consider the Soviet Union, particularly under the later Brev era. This was a society designed to systematically eliminate the object A from public life. The stated goal was the creation of the new Soviet man, a rational, collectivized, materialist being whose desires were perfectly aligned with the needs of the state. Ambition was suspect. Individual drive was Borgia egoism. Religion, the great historical vessel for transcendent desire, was suppressed. The state promised a future communist utopia, but the present was a landscape of gray conformity and quiet despair. This was a society that attempted on a mass scale to perform a symbolic castration on an entire population. It sought to create a nation of beta providers for the party. And what was the result? A vast spiritual emptiness, a black market of ideas, of blue jeans, of rock music, of anything that represented the forbidden object. The system created a society where the official culture was one of deadening stability, while the underground life thrived with a desperate illicit energy. The most telling symptom was the catastrophic decline in birth rates and the rampant alcoholism among Soviet men. When a man's drive is extinguished, when his lack is denied a constructive outlet, it turns inward into self-destruction or outward into a numb passive-aggressive resignation. He has no cause to fight for, so he stops fighting for anything, including his own life. The modern West is not the Soviet Union, but it employs a softer, more insidious version of the same principle. It doesn't use the KGB. It uses the language of safety, validation, and consumerism to achieve a similar end, the production of a manageable, desireless subject. It offers you video games, streaming services, and curated dating apps to keep you pacified, chasing digital phantoms while your real drive atrophies. This brings us to the deepest and most personal prison, the third trap that binds you more tightly than any external system, the unconscious desire for the mother. This is the return to the primordial dyad, the fantasy of wholeness we were castrated from at birth. Every man carries this psychic scar, this unconscious memory of a time when need was instantly met, when we were one with the source of all comfort. This is the most powerful fantasy of all, and it is the secret engine behind every failed relationship you will ever have. You are not seeking a partner, you are seeking a return to the real. You want a woman who will look at you and say, "You are perfect. You are complete. You need do nothing more. Rest here in my unconditional love." This is the siren song that lures you onto the rocks, because when you seek a mother in a lover, you are demanding she perform an impossible task. You are asking her to obliterate your lack to make you whole. But as we have established, your lack is constitu. To be rid of it is to cease to be a desiring subject, to be psychically dead. Furthermore, This demand is an immense oppressive burden to place on a woman. It is the weight of a god. No human can bear it. The initial stage of a relationship often has a maternal quality. The nurturing, the care, the intense focus. And this feels like joy, like a homecoming. But this is the bait. The moment the relationship moves from the fantasy stage into reality, the moment she reveals her own lack, her own humanity, her own need, you experience it as a profound betrayal. You were supposed to be my everything, and now you are asking me for something. You are revealing your own flaws. This is the shock that turns love into resentment. The woman you put on a pedestal as your maternal savior must, by the laws of human nature, fall from it. And when she falls, you don't see a human being. You see a failed goddess. You then either resentfully stay, now trapped in a dynamic of quiet blame, or you leave to begin the search anew for the next woman who will, for a few fleeting months, play the role of the mother before she too inevitably fails. This is the hell of repetition. It's not that you keep choosing the wrong women. It's that you keep asking the right women to perform an impossible, soul-destroying role. The path forward, then, is not to find the right woman or to heal your lack. It is to do the one thing the system has trained you not to do. To fully and completely assume your lack. This is the inspiration that lies on the far side of despair. Liberation is not found in filling the void, but in embracing it as the very source of your power and your freedom. Your lack is not your wound. It is your engine. Your desire is not a problem to be solved. It is a force to be channeled. The goal is to stop seeking the objet in another person and to instead orient your life around a cause that is so compelling, so personally meaningful that your lack becomes the fuel for its pursuit. This cause becomes your central focus. It can be your art, your business, your physical transformation, your intellectual pursuit, your mastery of a craft. It must be something that is yours, something that exists independently of any woman's approval or presence. When you do this, a profound shift occurs. You stop presenting yourself as a finished product seeking completion. You present yourself as a work in progress, a man defined by his trajectory, not his destination. You are an arrow in flight, not a trophy on a shelf. And in this state, you become psychically magnetic. You are no longer a needy child seeking a mother, but a driven man offering a woman a role in a grand adventure. You are inviting her to be the companion to your quest, the witness to your struggle, the one who shares in the gisance of your drive. You are not asking her to complete you. You are allowing her to supplement your journey. This is the only way to escape the traps. It shatters the beta-provider model because you were defined by your cause, not your compliance. It rejects therapeutic validation because you see your lack not as a pathology but as your propulsion system. And it obliterates the maternal fantasy because you are not seeking a mother. You are seeking a fellow warrior. This is how you turn the vicious cycle of desire into a virtuous cycle of purpose. You cease to be the object of her care and you become the subject of your own action. And in doing so, you become the object of her desire. You transform your existential lack from a source of shame into the foundation of your sovereignty. The cage door was never locked from the outside. The lock was always on the inside. And the key was your own acceptance of the beautiful, terrible, and liberating truth that you are. And always will be gloriously, powerfully, and unchangeably incomplete.